Imagine fighting a brutal, bloody war side by side with your best friends, just to build this totally new kind of enterprise from scratch.
Right. Literally risking your lives together.
Yeah, exactly. But now imagine that within like 10 years, you hate each other so much that you are actively trying to destroy each other in the press.
It's wild to even think about.
It is. The paranoia is suffocating, the backstabbing is constant, and, well, eventually one of you ends up dead in a duel.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is that is not the plot of some political thriller. That is the true, documented story of the American Founding Fathers.
It really is.
So welcome to today's deep dive. You, our listener, have handed us this massive, towering stack of primary source letters from these men.
I mean, it is a staggering amount of paper you've given us. We're talking correspondence spanning decades. It goes all the way from a 1774 address to Great Britain, right through to these highly nostalgic post-presidency letters written in 1813.
Exactly. And the mission for our deep dive today is to sift through this huge mountain of correspondence and extract the raw, unfiltered story of how these brilliant minds built a nation, but practically tore each other apart doing it.
Yeah, because the absolute center of the sources you've shared with us today is this bitter, existential feud between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, these letters are incredible because they are, anything but dry history. If you read the actual handwriting of these men, they are just dripping with anxiety.
Oh, total.
They're filled with profound philosophical debate, sure, but also incredibly petty personal grievances about what liberty actually means when you have to actually run a country.
Right. And to understand the feud, we have to start by recognizing that they absolutely did not begin as enemies.
No, not at all.
When you look at the early sources, there was a real baseline consensus. Like in the 1774 Continental Congress address, they are completely united in demanding liberty from what they called slavery and oppression.
Yeah, through the really harrowing days of the Revolutionary War, they were in the trenches together.
Figuratively and literally.
Exactly.
You have Jefferson writing in 1781 about frantically fleeing his home to escape Banastre Tarleton.
Oh, right. The terribly ruthless British cavalry officer.
Yeah, the guy tearing through Virginia. And then around the same time, in 1779, you have Hamilton writing passionately to his close friend, John Laurens.
Right, about that plan to raise battalions of enslaved black men in South Carolina.
Yes, to fight for freedom in exchange for their own emancipation.
Wow.
In those early days, they had a shared enemy. The goal was simple, just survive.
And they did survive. But defeating the British was really only the first step. The problem is, well, what comes after?
Right.
By the mid-1780s, the initial system of government they built, the Articles of Confederation, was completely failing. John Jay writes to Jefferson in 1786, and then to George Washington in 1787, just stressing the fundamental flaws of how they set things up.
Wait, why was it failing so badly, though? Because I feel like we often assume the founders just brilliantly drafted the Constitution on the very first try.
Oh, no, not at all. Under the Articles, the national government had almost zero power. They couldn't effectively collect taxes. States were just ignoring federal laws left and right.
Wow.
Yeah, and as John Jay pointed out, the legislative, judicial, and executive powers were all jumbled together in one body. He insists on the absolute need for a separation of powers just to keep the country from collapsing into total anarchy.
But the moment they actually sit down to fix it, and draft the Constitution, the fractures start to appear.
They really do.
You can see it clearly in a letter Jefferson writes to James Madison from Paris in December 1787. He praises the compromises of the new Constitution, but he aggressively demands a Bill of Rights.
Right. He's terrified.
Yeah, he is terrified of the federal government having a standing army or creating trade monopolies.
Which totally makes sense for Jefferson, right?
Yeah.
He just fought a war against this centralized imperial power. But then you look at Madison, who was writing to Washington and Jefferson around the exact same time, and he argues almost the complete opposite. Madison insists the national government absolutely needs a veto over individual state laws.
Really? A veto over the states?
Yeah. He argues that if the federal government can't override the states, the whole union will just dissolve.
And meanwhile, Hamilton is working closely with Madison on the Federalist Papers in 1788 to get this Constitution ratified. They started as allies.
They did.
It's honestly like A band that writes an amazing, unified debut album, but the second they get back into the studio for album 2, they violently disagree on the creative direction. How did it go sour so fast?
Well, what's fascinating here is how theoretical debates turned into practical nightmares once they actually held office.
Oh, sure.
When you are fighting a revolution, liberty is an abstract ideal you can all agree on. But when you are the ones tasked with actually managing a fragile nation's survival, suddenly those theories are put to a very harsh test.
Which brings us to the real explosion of this ideological rift in 1792. But before we get into the mudslinging, we should pause right here and make something absolutely clear to you, the listener.
Yes, very important point.
We are not taking sides in this deep dive. If you read the sources, both left-wing and right-wing political ideologies today can claim parts of these arguments, but we are just impartially reporting on the conflicting viewpoints contained in these historical letters.
Exactly. Both of these men sincerely, truly believed that the survival of the Republic was at stake. Neither man thought they were the villain,
Right.
but they just saw the world in fundamentally incompatible ways. And that comes to a head over money.
Yeah, it always does. Jefferson writes this blistering letter to Washington in May 1792. He outright accuses Hamilton's treasury system of being a corrupt scheme.
He really goes after him.
He genuinely believes Hamilton is using public debt and paper money to subvert the Republic and introduce, like, a British-style monarchy.
Exactly. Because Hamilton wanted the federal government to assume all the separate debts the states had incurred during the Revolutionary War and consolidate it into one massive national debt.
Wait, slow down. I need to play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
How does taking on massive amounts of debt actually prevent anarchy? Usually when a country is drowning in debt, that destroys the government. What was his actual logic?
It is brilliant, actually, but very counterintuitive. Hamilton knew that to survive, the federal government needed the buy-in of the wealthy class.
Okay.
So by consolidating the debt at the federal level and issuing bonds, he essentially made the richest men in America investors in the United States government.
Oh, I see. So if the federal government fails...
They lose all their money.
Wow.
Suddenly, the most powerful people in the country are highly motivated to ensure the national government succeeds, pays its bills, and establishes global credit. To Hamilton, failing to fund the debt meant the fragile union would dissolve, leaving the states vulnerable to foreign powers, just picking them off one by one.
Okay, yeah, I see how that works mechanically. But to Jefferson, this is a nightmare.
The total nightmare.
Because he had this deep philosophical hatred of debt. He had written to Madison earlier in 1789 declaring that the earth belongs to the living.
Right, that famous quote.
Yeah. His argument was that one generation cannot bind another with its debts. Think about it like inheriting a massive mortgage from your parents for a house you didn't even buy.
Which is a terrible feeling.
Exactly. To Jefferson, federal debt meant corruption. It meant tying the government to wealthy speculators. You know, people who bought up war bonds for pennies on the dollar from desperate Revolutionary War soldiers. Jefferson saw that as a fast-track to tyranny.
And Madison, interestingly enough, was pretty skeptical of Jefferson's earth belongs to the living concept when he replied in 1790. But he totally agreed with Jefferson that Hamilton's financial system was creating a corrupt aristocracy.
So Hamilton fights back, and his counterattack is fierce. In his own May 1792 letter to Edward Carrington, Hamilton is horrified.
He literally writes the words indignation and horror.
Yes. At the idea that Jefferson wants to undo the public credit, Hamilton realizes that Jefferson and Madison have formed a faction decidedly hostile to his administration. And he hits them where it hurts.
Oh, he does.
He accuses them of having a womanish attachment to France.
Which, you know, in the context of the 1790s is a very heavy accusation. France was entering the radical, bloody phase of its own revolution.
Right.
Hamilton preferred the stability and economic power of the British system, while Jefferson saw the French Revolution, despite all its violence, as a continuation of America's fight for liberty.
So you have these two brilliant men pulling in completely opposite directions, and sitting right in the middle of them is George Washington.
Poor Washington.
Honestly, when you're reading these letters from Washington begging his cabinet to get along, you can almost feel his blood pressure rising through the paper.
Oh, definitely.
Have you ever tried to manage two brilliant but completely stubborn coworkers? That was Washington's everyday life. In August 1792, an exhausted Washington writes nearly identical pleas to both men. He begs them for mutual forbearances and temporizing yieldings.
He is terrified the Union is going to tear apart.
And keep in mind the immense pressure Washington is under at this exact moment. He isn't just dealing with cabinet drama. He is literally trying to build a nation's capital out of a swamp.
Right, he's receiving architectural plans from Samuel Blodgett for the Capitol building.
Yeah. And at the exact same time, he is getting urgent, high-stakes reports of Spanish interference with southern Indian tribes.
Which could easily spark a war on the frontier.
Exactly. Washington is trying to hold a massive continent together, keeping multiple foreign empires at bay, and his top two cabinet members are actively trying to destroy each other.
It's absurd.
And how do they respond to his plea for peace?
Well, in September 1792, they both reply to Washington, and honestly, they act almost like wrong children.
They really do.
Jefferson complains bitterly about Hamilton's venom in the press. Specifically, Hamilton had been writing attack pieces under the pen name An American in Fenno's Gazette, which was a Federalist newspaper.
But Jefferson leaves out a pretty crucial detail there.
He does. He is fiercely defending his own hiring of the poet Philip Freneau.
Right.
Jefferson had given Freneau a job as a translator in the State Department, basically putting him on the government payroll just so Freneau could run the National Gazette, which was a paper dedicated entirely to bashing Alexander Hamilton.
That's literally state-sponsored mudslinging.
Exactly.
And Hamilton, on the other hand, writes back to Washington admitting that he is retaliating in the press, but he claims he is the deeply injured party and had to defend himself.
Typical.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Did Washington's mediation work at all, or did it just delay the inevitable?
It didn't even delay it. The fighting just escalated. The factionalism became so toxic that it literally started paralyzing American foreign policy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by July 1793, we hit the Little Sarah incident.
Okay, wait, what exactly happened there? Because the letters just refer to it in this frantic shorthand.
Right, so Edmond Charles Genet, a French diplomat, openly defies the United States government. He takes a captured British merchant ship, the Little Sarah, and literally starts arming it as a French privateer right in a U.S. port.
Right under Washington's nose.
Right under his nose. Genet is trying to use American soil to fight the British, which threatens to drag the fragile United States into a massive European war.
That is wild. No wonder Washington was panicking.
Exactly. Washington writes a frantic, almost desperate note to Jefferson demanding immediate advice on what to do. The internal division between the pro-French Jeffersonians and the pro-British Hamiltonians was making the United States look weak and disorganized on the global stage.
And this feud didn't just stay between Hamilton and Jefferson. When you look at the rest of the letters in this stack, you realize the collateral damage infected the rest of the Founding Fathers.
Yeah, really spread.
Take John Adams. He gets caught right in the crossfire.
Adams had a famously difficult personality, but he really did try to steer a middle course as president, especially by avoiding war with France.
And Hamilton hated him for it. By 1800, Hamilton writes a blistering public pamphlet calling President Adams vain, jealous, and totally unfit for office.
It was brutal.
Hamilton was furious over Adams's peace mission to France, which Hamilton felt undermined American strength. And when Adams reads this, he never forgives him.
No, he holds that grudge forever.
In letters to John Jay in 1800 and much later to Jefferson in 1812 and 1813, Adams just unloads. He despises Hamilton's exuberant vanity and insatiable egotism.
Adams fiercely defends his own administration against what he calls ignorant boys and points out how the anti-federalists capitalized on this massive split Hamilton caused within their own party.
It is truly tragic when you contrast all that bitter infighting with someone like Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, absolutely.
While Hamilton and Jefferson are tearing the cabinet apart, you have the elder statesman of the Revolution sitting just a few miles away, desperately trying to remind them of the big picture.
Yeah, Franklin spent his final years really trying to be the voice of reason. In 1789, he writes to Washington, offering the comfort of a philosophic mind.
He's still working, too, negotiating international trade and peace, writing to Robert Livingston and John Adams.
He never stopped. And then, in February 1790, just months before he dies, Franklin presents a formal abolition petition to Congress, pushing the nation to confront the reality of slavery and live up to its highest ideals.
He really represented a kind of moral unity they were rapidly losing.
He did. But the ultimate climax of this whole feud, the moment where all these letters and all this hatred collide, happens during the presidential election of 1800.
This is the craziest part of the entire deep dive.
It really is.
The election ends up in an electoral college tie between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. The decision gets thrown to the House of Representatives, and the Federalists' Hamilton's party have to decide who to back.
Right.
So Hamilton has a choice to make. Does he back his eternal rival Jefferson, or does he back Aaron Burr?
And we see his exact thought process in an 1801 letter to James A. Bayard. Hamilton admits his intense personal hatred for Jefferson.
Naturally.
He has spent a decade calling Jefferson a dangerous radical who will destroy the economy. But he advises his party to support Jefferson anyway.
Wait, why? After all the bad blood, all the newspaper attacks, why hand the presidency to your worst enemy?
Because, as Hamilton puts it in the letter, Jefferson at least has pretensions to character, while Burr is a profligate man of irregular ambition.
Wow.
Hamilton, despite believing Jefferson's policies would ruin the country, trusted Jefferson's fundamental character over Burr's complete lack of principle. He believed Jefferson had a flawed vision, but Burr had no vision other than his own power.
That is a stunning moment of clarity. And the tragic irony is that this specific choice, backing Jefferson's character over Burr's ambition, leads directly to Hamilton's death.
It does. Burr never forgets the insult.
The animosity just builds, leading to their infamous duel. We see the horrific cost of it in Hamilton's July 1804 farewell letter to his wife, Eliza.
Written just before he rose across the river to face Burr.
It is heartbreaking. A brilliant mind, extinguished because of the toxic political culture he helped create.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, George Washington saw this exact tragedy coming. In his 1796 farewell address, he explicitly warned the nation against exactly this kind of behavior.
He knew it was dangerous.
He warned against geographical divides, and he practically begged the country to avoid the danger of political factions. Yet, the intense personal and philosophical animosities of his two brilliant surrogate sons, Hamilton and Jefferson, birthed the very two-party system that Washington feared most.
So what does this all mean for us? When we look at this towering stack of letters, we don't see marble statues.
Now, we see deeply flawed, brilliant humans.
Exactly. We see a shared mission of liberty that fractured into intense, paranoid partisan warfare. It dragged in everyone from Adams to Madison. It stalled foreign policy. It literally spilled blood.
It really did.
Yet the nation survived. The foundations they poured, however messy, held the building up. And I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to ponder on your own today. When we look at how vicious this was, did the American Republic survive in spite of this infighting? Or was the intense friction between Hamilton's centralized energy and Jefferson's decentralized idealism exactly the crucible needed to forge a balanced nation?
That's the real question.
Could a perfectly unified, polite founding generation have actually resulted in a weaker, unchallenged democracy? Thank you for providing such incredible sources for today's deep dive. We'll see you next time.